Hello everyone. Today we'll be taking up the administration of the Vijayanagar Empire and the Bahamani Kingdom. First of all, let us look through the Vijayanagar Empire. The Vijayanagar Empire gradually developed a centralized administration with all its branches carefully organized. With the expansion of the empire, its rulers organized the administration with efficiency to remove the disorder that had prevailed during the periods of war and facilitated the pursuits of peaceful activities in various fields. The king was the head of all power in the Vijayanagar state. He was the authority in civil, military, as well as judicial affairs, and also often intervened to settle social disputes. He ruled with an eye towards Dharna. Along with running the army and the administration, the king was engaged in taking up public works for the welfare of the people and in transforming forests into fields for agriculture. Facilitating trade with foreign countries, he was assisted in the tasks of administration by his council of ministers. The administration of the Vijayanagar Empire was thus divided into central government, which comprised of the imperial councils, council of ministers, and the secretariat. The imperial council was a big institution. The nayaks of the provinces, the feudal lords, political leaders, scholars, poets, artists, and traders were included in it. Even the foreign ambassadors were invited to attend it. The work of the imperial council was mainly ceremonial and not administrative. The Council of Ministers, on the other hand, was assisted in the tasks of administration by a Council of Ministers appointed by the king himself. The ministers adopted the title Dandanayak, which meant the chief of administration. The members maintained soldiers and during battles supplied them to the king. Secretariat. Abdul Razak and Nunes refer to the existence of a sort of secretariat at Vijayanagar. Besides the minister, the other officers of the state were the chief treasurer, the custodian of the jewels, an officer who was to look after the commercial interests of the state, the prefect of the police, who was responsible for the prevention of crime and maintenance of order in the city, the chief master of the horse, and subordinate officers like the bards, who sang the praise of the king, the beetle bearers or personal attendants of the king, the calendar makers, the engravers, and the composer of inscriptions. Next is the provincial administration. The empire was divided for administrative purposes into several provinces such as Rajya, Mandala, and Chavadi, which again was subdivided into Vanthi, and then Nadu, and it was again subdivided into Asima. These were some of the provinces which were divided, and the last of all was the Sthala, which is the lowest unit in the territorial provinces. Each province was under a viceroy, Nayaka, or a Naik, who might be a member of the royal house or an influential noble of the state, or some descendants of the old ruling families. Its viceroy exercised civil, military, and judicial powers within the jurisdiction, but he was required to submit regular accounts of the income and expenditure of the charge to the central government and render military aid in times of need. Further, he was liable to severe punishment by the king if he proved to be a traitor or oppressed the people, and his estate could be confiscated to the state if he made default in sending 1/3 of his income to the king. The last of the administration is the local administration. The Vijayanagar rulers inherited and continued to maintain a healthy and vigorous system of local administration with the village as the lowest unit. Each village was a self-sufficient unit. The village assembly conducted the administration of the area through its hereditary officers like the Senativa or the village accountant, the Talara or the village watchman or the commandant, the Begara or the superintendent of forced labor, and others. These village officers were paid by grants of land or a portion of agricultural produce. The king maintained a link with the village administration through his officer called Nayakacharya, which means inspectors of the activities of the Gram Sabha, who exercise a general supervision over it. Gram was the smallest unit of administration, and Gram Sabha was the institution of village administration. Gram Sabha protected the welfare of the villages and land of the villages against outsiders, collect taxes for the government, and if the people were unable to pay the taxes, the Sabha confiscated their land. Coming to the land revenue, known as CIS, was the principal source of income of the Vijayanagar state. It had an efficient system of land revenue. Administration were carried out under 3 heads for the purpose of assessment, to be paid by the tenants, and they were wetland, dry land, and land with gardens. Assessment was fixed at 1/6 of the produce and increased it to some extent. The Vijayanagar rulers adopted the principle of differential taxation, that is, levied taxes according to the relative fertility of the lands. Besides the land tax, the ryots had to pay other kinds of taxes like grazing tax, marriage tax, etc. Other sources of income of the state were the revenue from customs duties, tolls on roads, revenues from gardening and plantations, and taxes levied on dealers in goods of commercial consumption. Manufacturers and craftsmen, porters, washermen, shoemakers, barbers, mendicants, temples and prostitutes also paid the taxes. Taxes were paid both in cash and kind. With regard to the judiciary system, the king was the supreme judge, but there were regular courts and special judicial officers for the administration of justice. Disputes were settled by the state officials with the cooperation of the local bodies. Penalties were chiefly of 4 kinds: fines, confiscation of property, ordeals, and death. Death or mutilation was the punishment of crimes like theft, adultery, and treason. Sometimes criminals were cast down before the feet of an elephant so that they may be killed by the knees, trunk, and tugs. The military administration of the Vijayanagar rulers was such that the rulers of the Vijayanagar had a carefully organized military departments called Kandachara, under the control of the Dandanayaka or Danayaka, which means commander-in-chief, who was assisted by a staff of minor officers. The state maintained a large and efficient army reinforced by auxiliary forces of the feudatories and the nobles. The several components of the army were the infantry, recruited for people of different classes and creeds, occasionally even including Muslims. The cavalry, strengthened by the recruitment of good horses from Ormuz through the Portuguese, were also some of the important elements, including elephants, camels, and artillery. One of the unique features of the Vijayanagar Empire was the Amara-Nayaka system. The Amara is believed to have been derived from a Sanskrit word, Amara, meaning battle or war. It was a major political innovation of the Vijayanagar Empire. The Amara-Nayakas were military commanders who were given territories to govern by the Raya. They collected taxes and other duties from peasants, craftspersons, and traders in the area. They retained a part of the revenue for personal use and for maintaining a stipulated contingent of horses and elephants. The Amara-Nayakas sent tribute to the king annually and personally appeared in the royal court with gifts to express their loyalty. Another system was the Ayaga system. The Ayagas were village servants or functionaries and constituted of groups of families. These were headmen known as Reddy or Goda or Maniya, an accountant known as Karnam, Sanabhova, and a watchman called Talara. According to this, every village was a separate unit and its affairs were conducted by a team of 12 functionaries who were collectively known as the Ayagas. They were granted tax-free lands called Mandya, and once these lands were granted, these Ayagas had a hereditary right over their offices. The Ayagas could also sell or mortgage their offices. The distinguishing feature of the Ayaga system is that special allocation of income from land and specific cash payments were provided to the village servants, including a particular office. Now, coming to the administration under the Bahamani Kingdom, the king and his council of ministers. The Bahamani administration was modeled in the Islamic pattern. The king was the supreme power in the state. He was the ruler, the judge, the administrator, the military leader, and sometimes even his own authority. Although the king was the supreme power in theory, in practice he depended on the advice of his ministers in deciding the state policy. Now let us look at the Council of Ministers. The chief minister was called Wakil Us Sultana. All orders issued by the king passed through him and bore the seal. Then we have the Minister for Finance, who was called Amir-e-Jumla. Then the External Affairs, who was called Nasir-e-Ashraf. And these were a part of the Council of the Administration. Regarding the administration of the kingdom, Alauddin Hassan Bahman Shah, the founder of the Bahman dynasty, divided his kingdom into 4 divisions called Tarafs, and each division was under a Tarafdar. When Muhammad Gavan became the prime minister, he divided the kingdom into 8 Salaskasib in order to control the power of the Tarafdars. The provinces or Atrafs were divided into Sarkars, and Sarkars were again divided into Paraganas for the convenience of administration. The lowest unit of the administration under the Bahamani kingdom was the village, and a Pargana consisted of a number of villages. With regard to the military administration, the military department of the capital maintained its own army. The Amir-ul-Umara was the commander of the army, and the army mainly consisted of soldiers and cavalry, including elephants, which were also employed. The rulers maintained a large number of bodyguards known as Kasalkar. There were 3 grades of categories of commander. The Amir-ul-Umara was the chief commander-in-chief, whose rank was 1,500, and under him were scores of commanders under the rank of 1,500 each. The chief commander was paid through assignments or grants of jagirs. Another characteristic features of the Bahamani army was the use of gunpowder that gave them military advance. Coming to the economy of the Bahamani kingdom, Muhammad Gavan ordered for systematic measurement of land, fixing the boundaries of the villages and towns. First, the income of the empire was ensured and became known in advance, and secondly, it also curbed the corruption of the nobles to the minimum, thereby increasing the state income. With regard to the revenue administration of the Bahamani kingdom, the provinces of the kingdom were made over to the grandees for the upkeep of their quota of the army, who collected land revenues and other taxes in their respective divisions. And they were expected to pay a certain fixed amount to the royal treasury. The officer of the Paraganas were held by 2 officers called the Desmukh and the Desai. The Desmukh was entrusted with the task of supervision of collection of the revenue, while the Desai was concerned with helping the accounts. The village was the last unit of administration in the kingdom. It has 3 officers, namely Patil or headman of the village, and then Kulkarni or the accountant, and the village watchman. These officers were hereditary. The village headman and accountant were remunerated by means of imam or rent-free land, and the officers were known as watan in the case of the headman and miras for an accountant. Besides the headman, there was an establishment which consisted of 12 artisans known as balutedars in Maharashtra, and the institution is known as Barabalut. The balut dues were to be paid by every farmer to its balutedars. And with that, we have concluded the topic, the administration of the Vijayanagar Empire and the Bahamani Kingdom. Thank you.